So guys, you're going to have to bear with me today. I woke up at 6 a.m. to record this video to have it ready for you early in the morning, and the software that I used to record has decided to just not open on my computer. I have tried so many fixes, but it still is not working, so I'm finding a different way to record, but that's why it's out a little bit late. And if there are any notable differences in the audio or the visuals, I do apologize. It should only be a one-off, and then we'll be back to normal for the next one. However, I still want to get this video out for you. So let's discuss Game Week 30 firstly before we look ahead to Game Week 31 and talk about some of the injuries and issues that we already face. And of course, a lot of people did wildcard. Most of us, it was unexpected due to the issues that we encountered between 29 and 30. And I will just know, a lot of people are saying this is why you should have waited until 31, injuries to Gabriel and Isak. If you wildcard in 31, you're equally as likely to get issues and injuries. And then people will say, why didn't you wildcard in 32? And like, you're always going to have issues in the week that you wildcard, or you always have the opportunity at least to have issues. So yes, I think Game Week 31 wildcarders might be able to sort some issues out, but I don't know that that's a good enough reason always to delay a wildcard. Obviously, the extra information is always useful, but like I say, every week that goes on, you get extra information, and at some point you have to play the chip. And largely, when I look at the wildcard, even ignoring the outcome, I'm really happy with most of the selections. I think there were a couple of mistakes. It was quite a disappointing week, though, right? I'm 50 all out. Palmer is still to play, so I'm on a small green arrow at the moment, but that will become a red arrow. And that's very disappointing because one of the benefits of a 30 wildcard, at least what we thought, was that it basically looked like a free hit. I didn't see any world in which I got a red arrow this week, and it looks now very likely that I will. And that's just the way FPL is sometimes, but you can't judge a wildcard off 1 week. But lots of disappointing teams and disappointing results, right? Bournemouth incredibly disappointing against Ipswich. Crystal Palace almost losing to Southampton. Munoz, Sarr, Mateta all blanking. Mateta came off in the 59th minute. I did not expect 5 points from Munoz, Sarr and Mateta. Salah blanking, and in all honesty, dropping a bit of a stinker as well. Fairly unpredictable, I would say, although there has been in 2025 a drop-off in Salah's performance. He is around 30th for non-penalty XGI amongst midfielders. Salah's not in a particularly good run of form. He's not getting the same number of chances, so that's something to consider moving forward. But already, when you're triple Palace against Southampton and your captain blank, you know it's not going to be an overly successful week. And obviously, the game week started with Raya conceding, Gabriel going off injured, and Saka being on the bench. And I thought it was disaster at that point, but luckily Bukayo Saka is that guy, and he came off the bench and scored within 6 minutes. On the Saka and Foden, this is just incredibly lucky and incredibly jammy. I always admit when I get lucky, and I always admit when I think I've been unlucky, and this is a case of being very lucky. I just got Saka and Foden's expected minutes in Game Week 30 horribly wrong. I know that Saka played a game behind closed doors and apparently got through it very well. He'd apparently had 6 full training sessions, and I thought Arteta would give him 60 to 70 minutes to build that fitness back up and get him back in the starting 11. He didn't start, but he came off the bench, and like I said, within 6 minutes, he managed to get a return. And because Arsenal did lose their clean sheet, he also picked up 2 bonus points. Or at least at the time of me recording, he's on 2 bonus points. So I feel very, very fortunate there to get 8 points from Saka. And on Phil Foden, I'm fully aware that in 2 of the last 3 Premier League games before Game Week 30, he didn't start. And in the game that he did start, he got 60. So I knew the risk bringing Foden in. His minutes hadn't been good. But before that, he'd started the previous 10 Premier League games. He had the international break. I thought that when you're struggling with Foden's form and confidence, the best game to give him would be Leicester at home. And I just thought it was the kind of game where Foden could thrive. I thought in the absence of Haaland, getting Foden on the ball in the centre of the pitch would be Pep's priority. So I'm never fully confident in a Man City player starting, but I really did think Foden would start this one. I got that horribly wrong. Not only did Foden not start, but they made 4 or 5 subs in that game and he didn't even come off the bench. Now, I'm very glad he didn't come off the bench because I managed to get a 5-pointer from Jacob Murphy subbed in. So, basically, I incorrectly predicted Saka's minutes, I incorrectly predicted Foden's minutes, and off the back of that, I got 13 points from the 2 of them. So there is an incredible amount of luck there, but you need luck in FPL. The only other 2 players I've not, or 3 players I've not mentioned, then is Gvardiol clean sheet. Man City looked really in command in that game, so that was never in doubt. Unfortunately, Kushanov was not in the team, and because Kushanov wasn't in the team, Gvardiol was playing centre-back. and he's got a very, very limited attacking threat apart from set pieces from centre-back. So 6 points is okay. He was very close to bonus points, I will add. And that's the good thing about Gvardiol playing centre-back, is that he's usually very good for bonus. And then my other two forwards outside of Mateta, Marmoush and Isak, both returned. Marmoush getting full bonus as well. Well done if you captained Marmoush. I did say that I was tempted, but I hate backing against Mohamed Salah. And I probably will do it for 31. But yeah, it just always feels horrible backing against him. So I decided not to captain Marmoush. Isak getting an 8-pointer was nice. He did come off in the 65th, 66th minute, apparently due to an injury, which we'll discuss in the next section, which isn't ideal. But at least those two return. And with Mateta, I didn't wildcard into Mateta. I owned Mateta anyway. So it's not like I chose Mateta on my wildcard and it's gone horribly. I had him in my team anyway. So in fact, so to discuss, and I've not actually counted whether I'm up on my wildcard or not. I wouldn't have had Gvardiol on if I didn't wildcard. And I wouldn't have been able to own both Marmoush and Isak. I probably would have bought one of them, but not both of them. And I wouldn't have had Bukayo Saka. But I would have had Nico Williams for a clean sheet. I would have had Brian Mbeumo. And maybe that's it in terms of attacking return. So I think I'm about equal in terms of where I was in my wildcard versus not. And obviously you would like to be up in general. But again, it's very difficult to assess how well the team's set up, how well it's gone off the back of 1 week. A wildcard is not a free hit. If it's a free hit, you can tell pretty immediately if the free hit went well. But a wildcard, I need to see over the next sort of 4 or 5 weeks. So yeah. I would say slightly disappointing. It's going to be a small red arrow after Palmer plays, I think. I can take that. We move on to game week 31, and we need to move on because there are a few issues we need to sort. So guys, I should note before we move on for the rest of the video, I am still working under the assumption that we have the predicted doubles and blanks correct. What that would mean is Arsenal, Palace, Aston Villa, and Man City all double in game week 33, and therefore those 4 teams blank in game week 34. That's the assumption I'm going under. Obviously, we have confirmation and know that both Newcastle and Palace double in 32, but 33 and 34 at the time of me recording this on Thursday morning is currently unconfirmed. Once it's confirmed, we can talk with certainty, but instead of me saying ifs, buts, and maybes, I'm just going to work under the assumption that we're correct in our predictions, and if we are not, then we would deal with the consequences of that in the near future. So, at the moment, I've got 0 in the bank and 1 free transfer, so not much wiggle room. But of course, off the back of a wild card, you hope that you don't have to make too many transfers, although we might based on the issues that we're facing. Let's start with the goalkeepers. So I went with Raya and Areola on the wild card. I'm still pretty happy with this pairing. I did discuss that the only issue with Areola is it does force you into a bench boost 33, or maybe even a bench boost later in the season, but it doesn't really allow a bench boost 32 because Areola faces Liverpool in 32. I actually prefer a bench boost 32, I'll be honest, but there wasn't a cheap goalkeeper that I could go for that allowed a bench boost in that week, and I didn't want to alter my wildcard just for the bench boost. So I'm happy enough. The only time that I plan on really playing Areola is for Southampton at home in game week 33, and that is still when I plan on playing the bench boost, and we might discuss that in a bit more detail later on. And so for now, Raya stays in the team. He's got Everton, Brentford, Ipswich, Palace in the next 3 games. 3 game weeks, and I'm pretty happy to have him. Now, with Gabriel possibly out long term, I don't have a diagnosis at the moment. I know a lot of the online physios seem to think he's out for a while, and that seems likely, sadly. I still think they are a decent defence. It will make them weaker, and it does make me question if I want a double up by selling Gabriel for another Arsenal defender, but having Raya still in place feels okay. A lot of people will only have had Gabriel, and therefore the general Arsenal defensive ownership would have reduced. So I guess what I'm saying is Arsenal defenders are a little bit more differential now. So yeah, Raya's okay to have. He is a bit expensive, but I've made that decision and I will stick with it until at least sort of game week 35, 36, and I'd be surprised if I make another goalkeeper transfer this season. So that situation's okay there. Raya against Everton. On Gabriel, I don't feel like I desperately need to make a decision this week, right? My other 3 defenders in Burn, Gvardiol, Munoz are absolutely okay. In fact, I would have had a bit of a benching headache and probably had to bench Dan Burn against Leicester if Gabriel were to be fit. So let's see what the news is that we get. But this just really solves a benching headache in 31. It also solves a benching headache in 32. Munoz and Dan Burn both double, and Konsa's got Southampton and Gvardiol's got Crystal Palace. So I already had 4 really good defenders for game week 32 as well. The only time it becomes a real concern is game week 33 because I plan on playing the bench boost and obviously Gabriel had the double. So I guess what I'm saying is, unless I have another defensive issue that crops up, I don't really need to sort out Gabriel until game week 33. So really that is my plan now, is to assess what information we get, decide, do I want to double up on the Arsenal defence again by moving Gabriel to someone like a Timber, who by the way also picked up a knock, or someone like a Saliba. I'm leaning less that way simply because Timber is also a doubt and just struggles with fitness a little bit himself. And when Ben White is back, even though he was supposed to be back and then picked up another reoccurring issue, but once Ben White is back, if he is back, he causes some competition there. And then Saliba actually for me is more expensive than Gabriel because I can only sell Gabriel for 6.2 and Saliba is now 6.3. I don't even have the funds to make a straight switch from Gabriel to Saliba. So I just think at the moment, it makes a little bit less sense to double up on the Arsenal defence, so I might move away from that. However, obviously, if Saliba suddenly becomes a goal machine, which in the past he did, remember when Gabriel didn't play for a couple of games and Saliba scored in consecutive games? Maybe I do look to move there, but I guess I would like a little bit more info and I don't need to make that move right now. So I guess for me, the Gabriel decision is nice and easy. Keep for 31, keep for 32, and then reassess ahead of game week 33. And obviously, if he is out long term, then I will have to sell him. And that is a potential extra transfer that I didn't plan on making. But for this week, Dan Burn against Leicester feels great. Leicester are really struggling and they're all but down now. In fact, they've been for a while. So they don't have that same motivation level. You might say they play with freedom. I look at it and just think that this is a game I expect Newcastle to dominate. But we've seen this week with Crystal Palace against Southampton and Bournemouth against Ipswich that nothing is a given in the Premier League. But anyway, Dan Burn feels like a good player to have for this week. I think Gvardiol's got an excellent fixture. Man United just cannot put the ball in the back of the net. We saw that with Nottingham Forest. We created chances in that game, United. Dorgu had like 0.8 XGI. Bruno had a couple of chances. We just can't put the ball in the back of the net. We don't have players that can score goals. The only issue is if Gvardiol plays at centre-back again, the attacking threat really is limited. And he's like 6 million for a centre-back that's not playing in a great defence and doesn't have as much attacking threat in that position. We really want him back at left-back, but O'Reilly's been very good there, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him continue at centre-back, especially if Kushinov is out. So yeah, I think it's a fine fixture for him, but something to assess moving forward that he might not have the same level of attacking threat. And then Munoz, I'm absolutely fine with. He was potentially one of the players that I might have looked to bench if I had Gabriel. It would have been between probably Burn and Munoz, but I love having him. He's so attacking. I know he was disappointing against Southampton, but before that, I think he'd returned in 7 of the last 8 game weeks with clean sheets, with attacking returns. He's still a fantastic asset. He has the double-double coming up. I'm very happy to have chosen Munoz. No regrets there at all. On the bench, I've got Ezri Konsa. So even if I were to pick up another defensive injury, which hopefully I wouldn't, Konsa against Forest at home isn't terrible. Aston Villa have just come off the back of a clean sheet against Brighton. Maybe we're starting to see signs that they're improving in the back end of the season. Maybe Aston Villa are going to be one of those teams that go on a nice run now. The only concern with Aston Villa, and we'll discuss it when we look at the midfielders that I'm looking to buy, and maybe even Ollie Watkins, is of course Europe. So the game against Southampton in game week 32 for them is sandwiched by the PSG ties. So how much are they going to prioritise the Premier League versus the Champions League? I'm almost certain that Emery's going to go full strength in both of those PSG games. So is the Southampton game the one that he rotates? Are players even like Ezri Konsa safe from rotation in game week 32? I'm not so sure. So that is always the concern with Aston Villa. So yeah, basically anyway, I'm pretty happy with all of the players that I've chosen in the defence and the goalkeeper spots. Gabriel injury is one of those things. It can always happen when you pick players, but I don't need to sort that right now. So I think the defence is good for at least a couple of weeks. Let's move on to the midfield. So guys, moving on to the midfield 4 at the moment with 1 on the bench, and we'll discuss why that player's on the bench and the fact that they might not end up being. They're all away from home, my starting 4 midfielders. But other than that, I'm okay with at least 3 of them. Let's discuss the elephant in the room, Phil Foden. So obviously 0 minutes in game week 30 for the best fixture, the fixture we really wanted him for, which was Leicester. He now faces United and Crystal Palace before the double. His minutes really don't look good at the moment. And interestingly, I completely missed an article that went out about 8 or 9 days ago now, which said that a lot of people at Man City are worried about Foden's mental headspace. He's really struggling. And we kind of knew that anyway, but I just missed that article. It's because I was having a bit of a break over the international break and during the FA Cup games that I just wasn't on social media. So I missed that. If I'd have seen that, maybe that would have been enough to put me off. Again, we know that he's struggling with confidence and he's struggling this season. But to hear that all of his teammates and people around the grounds are worried about Foden, that's obviously not what you want to hear as someone that's just brought him in. So is it a mistake to have gone for Foden? Probably. And I did say at the time that I acknowledged that it could have been a mistake. But do I want to sell him straight away? Do I see anyone that I desperately want to move to straight away in Game Week 31? Not really. If I think it was that much of a mistake, and I think he's a terrible asset, which I don't, by the way, I'll just play Ismaila Sarr against Brighton at home. It's a home game. Sarr's minutes continue to be pretty good. I know Crystal Palace struggled against Southampton, but I still back them as a team. Like, Brighton just lost 3-0 to Villa if we're going down that route. So I don't think I'll end up selling Foden this week. If I'm really doubtful, I'll just play Ismaila Sarr. The reason Phil Foden is still in the starting 11 is if he starts, I still prefer him to Sarr this week because Manchester United are a much weaker team than Brighton. And I know that Phil Foden loves playing against United. I've owned Phil Foden for a brace and a hat-trick. Or was it one goal? I've owned him for at least for a hat-trick against United. I remember he got a 19-pointer against Man United before. And I've owned him for another haul that he got against Manchester United. So as a United fan, watching the games, I know that Phil Foden loves playing against us. Now, sometimes that doesn't mean anything, right? That was Phil Foden of the past. Right now, he's in a really bad place in terms of his form. And his minutes aren't particularly good. So it really comes down to, for me, a minutes prediction. Because with form, I believe in it, right? Form is confidence. Form is a player in a good moment at that time. And you want to own players that are in form. But as I always say, sometimes in a slightly joking manner, a player is in form until they're not, and a player is out of form until they're not. The very nature of form is that it's temporary. So at some point, a player that's out of form will turn it around, normally. And a player that is in form will only be in form for so long. So I don't really buy into too much Foden's not playing well. My concern more so is the minutes. So if I expect Foden to start, I'll start him. If I am really doubtful around these minutes, which at the moment I probably am, I might just play Ismaila Sarr instead. The reason I don't really want to sell is, again, I want more information about who to move to. You could say just move sideways to Savinho. Would I be massively surprised if Savinho's benched and Foden starts in the next game? No. I don't think I want to make a sideways move to a City mid. With the Aston Villa mids, they've got Nottingham Forest this week. With someone like Jared Bowen, it's Bournemouth. Bruno Fernandes, I'm not going to bring him in against Man City. Like, who am I really moving to that I'm that desperate to? And you could say maybe like Mikel Merino, but then I would have to sell Gabriel to then shift into the midfield. So I just don't really see anywhere that I can go as of right now. We'll discuss the midfielders I'm looking at a little bit later on in the video. And I just want a bit more information to decide. I also want to know how cheap do I need to go? Because if maybe I want to squeeze in another expensive forward or defender, or I want to improve the goalkeeper spot, maybe I have to free up more funds. Or it might be that if I'm selling like Gabriel down to Wan-Bissaka or Kilman, funds might not be an issue. So it might allow me to even maybe do something like Foden to Palmer, if Palmer looks really good tonight. So yeah, I don't think Phil Foden was a good choice in the wild card. If I could go back, I would absolutely change it. But I don't see myself selling this week. I think it'll either be start or bench and start Sarr instead. And I'd love your opinion on that. So Ismaila Sarr I still think's fine, but at the moment he's on the bench. And the other three players look great, right? Salah and Saka, two penalty takers on set pieces. You would imagine with Saka playing like 25, 30 minutes in game week 30, and with the Real Madrid legs coming up, you would expect that Saka probably gets a start and around 60 to 70 minutes against Everton, which is good enough. I think he is good enough to do something in that time. And the benefit of Saka wasn't really game week 30 and 31. It was owning a player that on any day, anytime he's on the pitch, can return, which we saw, but also saving a transfer ahead of game week 33. Everyone is going to want Saka for game week 33. And I would argue he might be the best captain. Marmoush is looking very good right now. But Saka against Ipswich and Crystal Palace in 33 is arguably the best captain. So what Saka has done is it saved me a transfer. And I am very glad that I went for Saka as a result. Because with issues to Gabriel, maybe Isak, Foden, if I hadn't gone for Saka as well, there's just so many issues to sort in my team. So yeah, very happy to have him. Not expecting too much against Everton, but I am hoping for a start. And with Salah, yeah, like I say, in 2025, Salah has not been at it in the slightest. He's really struggled in terms of getting high quality chances. Even his creativity has dropped off a little bit as well. But with West Ham and Leicester after Fulham, and by the way, we saw that Saka got a return in 6 minutes against Fulham. Salah could definitely return in that game. Do I want to captain Salah this week? No, not at all. In fact, I would desperately like to captain someone else, and I don't know that I'm going to captain him unless Alexander Isak is a major doubt, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to own him. So yeah, he's absolutely fine. And then the fourth and final midfielder is Murphy. It's a great game for him. These are one of the reasons that I had Murphy in the team, not only for the double, but also the game against Leicester as well. So at the moment, Murphy's in the starting 11. In fact, even if I want to start Ismail Assar, like I said, I think it'll be instead of Phil Foden. I can't see myself benching Murphy when we know how bad Leicester are. And Murphy's minutes continue to look good. Even subbed off at the 66th, at least he's starting. So, despite Foden being a bit of an issue, I am still happy with that midfield. Because even if I don't want to start him, I think a midfield of Murphy, Sarr, Salah and Saka is absolutely fine as well. So no real need or desire to make a midfield transfer. So let's now move on to the three forwards. So guys, moving on to the three forwards, and we'll start with the man that was most impressive in game week 30, which was Omar Marmoush. He was brilliant. He had over 1.5 XG in that game. Probably should have come away with more. He had over, I think it was like 8 shots in the game in total. If he continues playing like that, then he is a captaincy option every single week. And I would argue, if Isak is a doubt and you don't want to go for Salah, Marmoush against Manchester United is a genuine captaincy shout. And it might end up being, sadly, as a United fan, where I end up going if Isak is out, which we'll discuss. But on Marmoush, we just need to start considering him, I think, in that more premium category, if he can continue this run of performances, because he's been brilliant with Haaland in the team. But in this game, and it was against Leicester, so let's take that into account, but he just looked like the main man, right? He looked like the talisman, and we love that in a team. And if he is on penalties, as well as, by the way, taking some set pieces from an in-swinging from the left-hand side, he's a great, fantastic option. And if you don't own Marmoush, I would put him up there as a priority transfer in, because apparently Haaland won't be back until around game week 36 at the earliest. So you're going to get plenty of game weeks with Marmoush, and his price is just going to continue to go up. So very happy to have him. On Mateta, I think this is just a matter of his fitness being slightly lower. Obviously, maybe playing a bit tentative with the headpiece on, headwear, whatever you want to call it. But obviously, that's probably playing on his mind slightly. I still think Mateta's great, but I did expect his minutes to shoot back up a little bit in 30. I thought he'd probably get like 75. To see him come off in the 59th minute wasn't ideal. My concern with Mateta, and I spoke about this across the last couple of weeks, is Mateta is a very streaky player. We've seen that Mateta can go like 20 games without scoring, and then the back end of last season, and also the spell this season, he can also be one of the best strikers in the Premier League. In fact, before this game, across the last 6, 8, and 10 game weeks, Mateta was top of the Premier League for XGI, ahead of Salah, ahead of Haaland, ahead of Isak, ahead of all these fantastic players. Mateta was top. However, if he's now going to go through a slightly dry spell where he's struggling to score goals and get chances, then I wouldn't be surprised to see Mateta blank in all of these games. I don't know how much to worry about that, right? I've got Mateta in the team now. I still think he's a fantastic forward, and he's got a double-double after Brighton. So I think if you've chosen Mateta, you stick with Mateta. I do think if you're on a 31 wildcard, there's certainly justification to go for one of Munoz or Henderson, plus 2 of Sarr and Eze. So you could go for double midfield, 1 defender, or you could go for Henderson, Munoz, and then 1 midfielder. I don't think Mateta is absolutely essential. And in all fairness, I said he wasn't essential in 30. I just love the man. So I'm happy to have Mateta, but I do acknowledge that if he also has a bit of a rusty game against Brighton, gets sort of 70 minutes again, there are some slight concerns about his long-term place in the team. For now, though, like I say, with the probable double-double that we've got coming up, Mateta will be staying, which leaves the final player in the starting 11 being Alexander Isak. So Alexander Isak apparently picked up an issue in the game, which is why he came off at the same time as Murphy. By the way, apparently Murphy's fine, but Trippier also picked up an issue. Both apparently groin related. So I think on Trippier, he said it was a cramping sensation in the groin. With Isak, he said that he wasn't fully confident like running around on it, and that it was a bit of an issue with the groin as well. It was obviously not a massive issue because we didn't see him like go down and get pulled off, and he wasn't like wincing on his face. So we didn't really notice anything. In fact, SofaScore, the app that I use during games, didn't note it as an injury substitution straight away. So maybe it was just a bit of tightness. But a groin injury in a similar way to a hamstring injury is always a massive concern, because these are the sort of things that unless they're fully rested, they just don't go away. And I do wonder, even if Isak is probably okay, is he risked against Leicester? The only thing is, Anthony Gordon last season, I remember Eddie Howe said he wasn't in training, he was a major doubt for the game, and he said in the Friday press conference that up to that point before the Friday presser, Anthony Gordon hadn't been in any form of training, and then he started Saturday 3 p.m. the next day. So firstly, Eddie Howe lies, but secondly, Eddie Howe does play players that do have slight niggles, especially with things like hamstrings and groins. So I still wouldn't be surprised if Isak starts. The good thing about Newcastle is they actually play on Monday. That's a little bit extra time to recover in comparison to teams that are playing obviously on like Saturday and Sunday. So I think as of right now, unless we get a really negative update on Isak, he is my captain. Because when I look at Salah against Fulham, I think he could return, but it's not a game I expect him to go massive in. I like Marmoush against Manchester United, but we've still got a very small sample size of what City look like without Erling Haaland and exactly how good his minutes will be and whether he is on penalties or not. With Isak, you know exactly what you get. Leicester are, as bad as United are, a worse team than Manchester United. And I just think Isak's a better asset than Marmoush. So if Isak is fit, I would much rather captain him than Marmoush. In terms of other players, I could consider Saka, but his minutes, I'm just not so sure. Murphy, as much as I'm happy to have him, he's not a captaincy option. It really is Salah or Isak or Marmoush. So I'm choosing between those three. Let me know where you're currently standing for captaincy. If he was playing on Saturday, I think I'd leave it. I don't think I'd captain him because I'd be worried. But the extra couple of days to recover, I'm hopeful that it'll be okay. At the time of you watching this, you might already know that he's out. If Isak is confirmed out, if it's only confirmed out for the weekend, if he says, yeah, he's not going to be available for the weekend, but might be fine after that, because he's got the double in the 32, I just don't think you can justify selling him. So what I would do instead is play as my Lassar. My concern with that is, let's say Isak's out, and let's say Gabriel's out, right? I can bring in as my Lassar for Isak, play a 3-5-2, but one of those players is Phil Foden, who I just don't know if he's going to get minutes again. And my only bench cover then is Ezri Konsa against Forest at home. If I have any other issues, I'm then without a bench. So it's going to get into a slightly tricky position where if Isak and Gabriel are both out, if I have any other issues, I might be forced into a transfer. So as of right now, with the team looking the way it is, this is the way I plan on going into Game Week 31. However, if further issues crop up, I will probably have to make a transfer. So it is worth looking through my watch list, not only for Game Week 31, but also for 32 and 33, to look at some of the players that I'm potentially looking to bring in. So guys, just to remind you around my chip strategy, because I think that will explain why certain players are on my watch list and others maybe aren't. I am looking to bench boost in Game Week 33 at the moment, but I might end up delaying that until the later part of the season if I pick up more injuries, because I don't want to be taking -8s or -12s to field a decent bench boost. And I also don't want to bench boost with a rubbish team just because that's the week I plan to bench boost. So I'm not committing to that, but I'm looking at a Game Week 33 bench boost. And therefore, the plan was to roll through 31, roll through 32, and then get to Game Week 33 and make 3 transfers there to field a good bench boost. So that is still the plan, but obviously with the issues to maybe Isak and also Gabriel, I might be forced into making a slightly earlier transfer. So let's start with the defenders. In terms of cheap defenders, I'm actually looking at Max Kilman at the moment rather than Wan-Bissaka because he's a little bit cheaper. And there are some transfers where I don't have any money in the bank to upgrade someone like a Dan Burn. So if I make a certain set of transfers and I don't want Dan Burn on my bench boost, and I only have 4.4 million. Kilman is interesting. They play against, obviously, Southampton. I already have Areola in my team, so that would be a double up on the West Ham defence, but it's not a bad fixture to double up on against Southampton at home. Mazraoui is also an option at 4.3, but Dorgu is the one that's on my list here for his game against, I think, Wolves at home in that week. The reason Dorgu's there is he's just so attacking. If you watch Manchester United, he had 0.8 XGI in the game against Nottingham Forest. That was most of Man United's XGI came from Dorgu. So I just think that he's an asset where he could, I'd only probably play him in the week that I bench boosted, but he's a player that could go and get you a 15-pointer, and there aren't many out there that you can say that confidently. The clean sheet's probably less likely, but he could definitely get an attacking return. So I like Dorgu as a shout, and again, he's quite cheap. The player that I'm most interested in, though, and possibly my most likely Gabriel replacement, is actually Konate. I don't currently have a Liverpool defender. Liverpool continue to defend really well. although Beto probably should have got a couple against Liverpool in game week 30. He's just a player that's very solid, still very cheap, looks relatively nailed on and has been for a while. And he's got Leicester in game week 33. So whilst he doesn't double, he would serve me very well there, and I could have him for the back end of the season as well in the weeks that I need him. So Konate is a serious consideration for me. So at the moment, in terms of Gabriel replacement, Konate is the most likely. And then in terms of Dan Burn replacement for game week 33 bench boost when he plays Villa, I'm looking at Kilman and Dorgu. Midfield is really where I'm most interested, though. And the reason for that, I obviously own Phil Foden. Phil Foden is an issue because his minutes just look absolutely in the bin. And I also own Jacob Murphy, who, by the way, is great for 31 and 32. But again, in game week 33, when I like to bench boost, he's got Aston Villa. So I'm looking at potentially needing 2 midfield transfers, one on Foden, one on Murphy. So I'm very, very interested. And the player that I'm most interested in might well be Merino. I've asked quite a few Arsenal fans. Pretty much every Arsenal fan that I've asked seems to think that Merino is pretty much nailed on. 2 reasons. Apparently, and I'm saying apparently because I'm not an Arsenal fan and I trust people that watch Arsenal on a more regular basis, Arteta doesn't tend to change things that are working quite well. And Merino as the 9 is working quite well. And Trossard apparently hasn't been very good in that 9 role this season, who's the only other real player that you would expect to sit in there. Like, Wanyeri could play as a false 9, for example, but that seems very unlikely. And also, Arsenal cross the ball a lot. And if they're crossing the ball a lot, you want someone in there that can win headers. And Merino has obviously shown that he can do that. So if Merino continues to play as the 9, decent underlying data, obviously just in the right place at the right time due to the position he's playing, at 6 million... switching Gabriel to someone like Konate, Kilman, Dorgu, and then moving to double Arsenal attack with Saka and Merino could be a little bit of a nice differential play. And it would obviously give me a nice cheap replacement for someone like Murphy, or if I want to downgrade Foden, it will give me over 3 million in the bank to then move around elsewhere. I've obviously got Martinelli on here as well. I think Martinelli might be a better asset than Merino for me, but if Merino is nailed, you're telling me then that Martinelli's going to start every game ahead of Trossard on the left. And that Wanyeri's not going to start a single game either. I just can't see it. And when Saka's nailed on, and we're saying Merino's nailed on, Martinelli's the player that you could potentially rotate out. However, he was brilliant in game week 30. Probably man of the match, even ahead of Bukayo Saka after he came on. Like, Martinelli was really, really good. So if Merino and Martinelli continue to play really well, maybe he will just stick with that front 3. The concern, of course, then again, is the Real Madrid game and games. And if they obviously progress through that, maybe they start to prioritise the Champions League. So I don't know, basically. I think what they do in the Champions League, the team they play and whether they progress will impact a lot of what I do in terms of looking at Arsenal players. But Merino and Martinelli are definitely on the list. And speaking of Champions League, it's the main issue that I have with Rodgers, Rashford, Asensio. Now, luckily for me, I don't need them in 32. I need them in 33. But of course, if Aston Villa do progress, they will prioritise the Champions League. If they don't progress, then I think it's a little bit more interesting. We could potentially be looking at bringing in any of the 3 of them. But then again, they've got the FA Cup as well that they're also in. So I just wonder with Aston Villa, like, how much rotation might we see in the Premier League? In terms of minutes, like, Rodgers is that guy. Rodgers is just always on the pitch. And every time we expect Rodgers to get a rest, he doesn't. So as much as we can sit here and say we might expect him to get a rest against Southampton because of the PSG games, he just doesn't get rested. So if I want an expected minutes monster, it's definitely Morgan Rodgers. Obviously got the 2 assists in game week 30 as well. But Rashford and Asensio, I just think, have a little bit more goal threat, and they've shown that recently. Like, Asensio didn't even start that game because apparently he had a bit of fatigue. Comes on and gets a goal and an assist. I love Asensio as a pick. Like, I really do, and he's quite cheap as well. He's only a 0.1 more than Merino. But apparently he is struggling a little bit with his fitness and fatigue. So do I want to bring in a player that I just don't expect to play every game? Rashford is interesting because he can play as the 9 or he can play off the left. And so if Watkins doesn't start, Rashford will. And if Watkins does, he could start ahead of Ramsey. So I do wonder if Rashford's minutes will continue to look quite good now, especially with the way that he's playing. The truth is that I just don't know. And as of right now, if you were to force me to bring in an Aston Villa player, I would go for Morgan Rodgers because he's just the most nailed on. I like the idea of them though, because of course we're expecting them to double in 33. Savinho is on here, but like I say, I would find it difficult to move from Foden to Savinho because I just don't trust that Savinho starts every game either. But he certainly seems a little bit more nailed on than Foden as of right now. Bowen is on here. I obviously wouldn't bring in Bowen in 32, but if I'm looking specifically for 33, Southampton at home for Bowen is a really nice fixture. So if I'm looking to sell Foden, obviously I wouldn't be able to get there from Murphy, but if I'm selling Foden, Bowen is a serious candidate for the transfer, but only in 33. Like if I wanted to sell Foden in 32, I obviously wouldn't bring Bowen in for Liverpool. I've put Elanga on here simply because he plays against Spurs in 33, and after that, the fixtures are still good for Forest, and Forest do have a potential double in 36. It's a small chance, but they do have a potential double in 36. So Elanga has to be on there as a cheap option. If I can't afford Rodgers, or I just want another cheap option to replace Murphy, Elanga, with the way that he's playing and the role that he's playing right now, he has to be a real option for me. So midfielders, I'm certainly interested. I think right now, if you were to force me to replace both Foden and Murphy, I think it would be Marino and an Aston Villa midfielder. I might end up keeping Foden, though, if he starts the next two. So I think in that case, it's probably Morgan Rodgers or Marino that I'm narrowed down for my Murphy replacement. For the forwards, I'm really only looking at Ollie Watkins. I am slightly concerned that Rashford's playing very well and that they don't have to play Watkins in every Premier League game now. But I do think once his fitness is perfect, he does tend to start most games. We've seen that. Even with the competition from Duran once he was fit, even with Rashford and Asensio and Rodgers and Ramsey all playing well, to this point, this is the first time I think in the Premier League for a while now that Watkins has been on the bench. So I still think his minutes will continue to look good. And obviously him having the double, something like Isak to Watkins in 33 is definitely in my consideration. For Evanilson, the only reason he's on there is if I am looking to sell Isak but I want to free up some funds for whatever reason, then Evanilson would be the cheap forward that I would look to move to. So yeah, those are the players on my watch list right now. Nothing more to really say for this game week, in all honesty. I'm going to try and roll the transfer if I possibly can. Obviously, the deadline's only a couple of days now. If Isak is ruled out, I still think I'm just going to play as Mylasar instead. But if I am worried about other players as well as Gabriel and as well as Isak, and I'm forced into making a transfer, potentially something like Gabriel to Konate is an option for me to just give me a little bit more cover. Or I look to just move on Isak and just go straight to Watkins now. But I would need, for me to sell Isak to Watkins, I would need 100% confirmation that Isak misses 32, because I don't want to sell Isak, who is probably the best captain for 32, unless I am absolutely sure. Let me know what you think of that watch list. Let me know if you think there is anyone that I've missed, and let me know what your plans are for Game Week 31 as well.